Aloha ohana. I hope you guys are all having a great week. I hope you guys are staying safe, you're staying healthy, you guys are getting ready for the holidays, spending time with family, spending time with friends that have become family. Whatever you guys do, however you guys do it, I truly hope you guys are all doing well. Now, before we jump into today's case, as usual, please remember that this video is intended to raise awareness, and this channel is intended for viewers 18 years old and older. If this is your first time visiting the channel, don't forget to join our ohana and turn on all your notifications so that you don't miss any uploads. Whew, again, out of breath. I promise I'm gonna cut my intro short. As you can tell from today's title, we are going to be talking about the tragic case of Orlando Ganal Sr. And there's a lot of people. We got a friend. We got one of our friends. Anyways, there's a lot of people involved in this case, and I'm going to try my very best in hopefully presenting the information to you guys that makes sense. With that being said, and with our little friend here, let's just start from the very beginning. Orlando Ganal Sr. was born in 1954 in the Philippines. As I was doing research on this case, I could not find any information about Orlando's childhood, his background, his education, his parents. Basically, there was very little to none information out there. But what I did find out is that Orlando Ganal married his first wife, a woman by the name of Leticia Ganal. The two of them did have a daughter whom they named Ronalyn Castillo Ganal. Unfortunately, the marriage with Leticia would not last long. I believe they got a divorce after being married for only a little over 2 years. And in 1970 or 1971, around that time, Orlando Ganal Sr. moved to Hawaii. Now in Hawaii, this is where Orlando would end up meeting a woman who would become his second wife. A woman by the name of Mabel de la Cruz. Now, Mabel, like Orlando, was also born in the Philippines. And like Orlando, I could not find any information about Mabel's childhood, her background, anything like that. But I do know that Mabel was also married to a man just a little over 15 months, and unfortunately that marriage with her first husband did not last very long. Now, when Mabel and Orlando met one another, they were very attracted to each other. They were attracted physically, mentally, intellectually, and in November of 1974, Orlando and Mabel would become husband and wife. Mabel and Orlando would welcome their first and only son together, a little boy who they named Orlando Ganal Jr. Jr.'s nickname, and pretty much what everybody would call him, is Jun Jun. The marriage between Orlando and Mabel would be a very rocky roller coaster one. They would fight about finances, they would fight about their son, and the couple ended up separating many times over the course of being married for those 19 years. According to Mabel, she claims that whenever they would split up, Orlando would always be the one to first seek reconciliation. Orlando worked as a delivery driver for a company on Oahu called Young Laundry and Dry Cleaning, while Mabel worked as a claims clerk for Island Insurance. Like I mentioned, the marriage between Orlando and Mabel was, a very rocky marriage. Orlando would later claim that he was pretty much happy in the marriage until the year 1991. Orlando Ganal worked as a delivery driver for Young Laundry and Dry Cleaning for about 14 years. However, on February 15, 1991, Orlando hurt his back while working on the job. And this injury was so bad, and Orlando was in excruciating pain where he became unable to work. Many of you are probably familiar with injuries on the job. Usually what happens is you would file a workman's comp claim. That's basically where the insurance company would look at your injury, how long you've been employed in your specific position at your specific employer, and they kind of figure out, you know, first of all, if you are eligible to receive workman's comp. If you are, then the insurance company then figures out how much money you would be entitled to and how long you would be able to claim workman's comp. If you're eligible to claim workman's comp, you would be getting, you know, a weekly or bi-weekly check while you're not working, and I think you would be doing, you know, physical therapy, whatever it is you need to get you back to a place where you would be healthy and able to resume your job duties. Now, Orlando got hurt on the job, so he tried to file workman's comp. According to Orlando, Young Laundry and Dry Cleaning is giving him a hard time in being able to collect workman's comp. I'm not sure what the details are, but because of this, Orlando was not able to work, and no money and no income was coming in. He was in excruciating pain. Orlando became despondent. And now, many of you know, when there is financial trouble in a relationship or in a marriage, there tends to be added stress on the family. So this is no exception. This is what happened. Orlando and Mabel started to argue and fight more because they were feeling the effects of Orlando not being able to work and bring in income. Because according to Orlando, the deal between he and his wife, the family was going to live off of Orlando's income, while the money Mabel receives from working as a claims clerk at Island Insurance was to be put in the family's savings account. So of course, not having Orlando's income changed the dynamics of this family situation. Now, to make matters worse, around this time, Mabel began to talk about a specific co-worker, a man by the name of David Touchettes, to her husband. Touchettes, maybe it's like Target, you know, it's Target. Anyways, she started to talk about this co-worker a lot to her husband. Obviously, this began to raise some red flags to Orlando. He became very, very suspicious. His wife was suddenly talking about another man. Now, at first, Mabel denied having an affair, but she continued to talk about this co-worker, David, which continued Orlando's suspicions. During Memorial Day weekend, Orlando was planning to take a trip off island. But at the very last minute, he changed his mind and decided not to go for whatever reasons. When Orlando gets home, he said that Mabel was not home, and he said that he could not find his wife anywhere. At this point, Orlando has already found out a lot of information about this co-worker, David. He found out where David lives, the type of truck that David was driving. Orlando drives to David's house in Kailua, and he finds Mabel's car parked outside of the home where David Touchettes was living with his brother and his sister-in-law. When Mabel finally gets home, Orlando confronts Mabel. And now I'm not sure if this is the time where Mabel actually comes clean about having an affair with David. I know that it is during an argument, Mabel tells Orlando that she had sex with David. Of course, Orlando was very, very hurt. This was just a blow to his heart. He's super heartbroken. And Mabel continued the affair. She continued talking to David. She continued flaunting her affair in front of her husband. Mabel even had the audacity to blame Orlando for her affair. There were many, many arguments after the truth about Mabel's affair came to light. In one incident, in a drunken state, Mabel said that she thought she was going to die and asked David over the phone, the man that she's having this affair with, in front of her husband if he loved her. I mean, can you imagine? She's on the phone with her lover in front of her husband while her husband is next to her, saying that she thinks she might die, and asks David if he loves her. In another incident, Mabel and Orlando are having sex. And according to Orlando, Mabel forced him to have sex with her while she's describing having sex with her lover. Orlando said that he didn't know if he felt mad or hurt while this is going on. I mean, I can imagine he probably felt both. But he said that his wife admitted that the affair was a mistake and that she asked Orlando for forgiveness. Later though, while the couple was alone at a hotel, according to Orlando, he claims that she said she wished that David was there with her at the hotel having sex with her instead of Orlando. Orlando said at this point he was angry and he was hurt. So at this point, we know that Orlando has stopped working. He's not been able to collect workman's comp, which is affecting the family's finances, which is also contributing to more fights and arguments between Mabel and Orlando. And the kicker is that Mabel is having an affair. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, you know, people have affairs all the time, so why not just get a divorce? Why didn't Mabel leave Orlando, or why doesn't Orlando leave Mabel? You have to remember that the couple has been married for about 19 years. They have a son together. You know, Orlando is very, very much in love with Mabel. And Mabel, although she's having an affair, she does still love her husband. You know, people are complicated. You know, humans are complicated. It's not black and white. Eventually, everything became just too much. Orlando would file for divorce on August 12, 1991. Now, Mabel moved out of the family home, and she and her son Junjun moved in with her parents, 94-1094 Puloku Street, while Orlando Jr. stayed with his father. Orlando hired an attorney, a woman by the name of Barbara Melvin, and he ended up filing for divorce on August 12, 1991. Orlando also applied and got approved for a couple of temporary restraining orders against his wife Mabel. The restraining orders prohibited Mabel from annoying, harassing, and disturbing Orlando's peace. Also, it prohibited Mabel from spending any more of their savings. And lastly, it prohibited Mabel from interfering with Junjun's preference to stay with his father. According to a court affidavit that was filed on August 14 for one of the TROs, like I mentioned before, the couple had agreed to live off of Orlando's income while the money from Mabel's work would be put into a savings. Now, as of last April, there was $25,000 in Mabel's credit union account. But since Mabel began her affair with David, she had spent $9,000 of that $25,000, of which $3,000 was on the family. Now let's talk a little bit about Mabel's lover, David Touchettes. I couldn't find too much information about David, but what I did find is that David had come to Hawaii from Syracuse to visit his brother Michael. David worked full-time as a telephone installer, but he also worked part-time at a microfilm company. And this is where he would end up meeting Mabel Ganal in early 1991. Now, when David came to Hawaii, his brother Michael Touchettes, along with his sister-in-law Wendy Touchettes and their two small children, decided to get a bigger home in Kailua so that the five of them could all live under one roof. Michael and Wendy did not approve that David was fooling around with a married woman. But according to David, he said that his brother Michael knew that he and Mabel were truly in love. And according to Wendy, which is David's sister-in-law, she said, you know, she was not happy with the affair, but David did also live in the Kailua home and he did pay rent. After Orlando found out that his wife was having an affair with David, David claims that he got several threatening phone calls from Orlando. Michael and his wife, Wendy, had moved to Hawaii from Baltimore a little over a year ago. Michael and Wendy had two small children at the time, Kala, who was about 2 years old, and Joshua, who was about 10 months old. The family were very big and active in the Mormon faith, and they were raising their two children with the Mormon values. Church members, family, and friends would describe Michael as a quiet, family-oriented man. He was a very, very nice person. Wendy, a full-time homemaker, was a great mother to her two kids. Michael's college buddy and brother-in-law, Arthur Lowell, had invited him to become a business partner in a Photoshop lab. Now, Michael and Arthur Lowell, like I said, went to college together. They also married sisters. Michael married Wendy, and Arthur married Wendy's sister, Amy Lowe, and the two couples were very close. In fact, the Touchettes and the Lowes used to live together in Kaneohe. When Michael learned that his brother David was going to move to Hawaii, Michael and Wendy and the two small children moved out of the Kaneohe home and decided to look for a home in Kailua so that David could move in with them. On Sunday, August 25th, 1991, the Touchettes went to church in Kailua like they always did. Later that day, Michael and another church member were going to counsel other Mormon families in the area. However, Michael changed his mind. Instead, Michael and his family went to a birthday luau. According to Wendy's sister, Amy Lowe, she said, quote, "They all had a great time." End quote. The Touchettes got home that night. It was about 8:00 p.m. They decided to give the children a bath, read them a bedtime story, and go to sleep. They were exhausted because they were gone since 4:00 p.m. that day. Usually, the two small children, Kala and Joshua, sleep with their parents in the bed, and this night was no different. So they give the children a bath, they read a bedtime story, and the four of them fall asleep on the bed. However, this would be the last night that the four of them would ever sleep together. On Sunday, August 25th, 1991, around 11:00 p.m. that night, Mabel, her son Junjun, and Mabel's parents are upstairs in the living room just watching TV, when all of a sudden they hear a loud bang. Someone is breaking in through the front door using a sledgehammer. Mabel's mom, Mrs. Aradina Dela Cruz, was shot and killed on the sofa that she was sitting on. Mabel's father, Santiago Dela Cruz, who is 58 years old at this time, was a Oahu Sugar Company service truck driver, is shot in the stomach. As Mr. Dela Cruz is bleeding from a stomach wound, he staggers down an inside stairwell, screaming, quote, "I'm dying, I'm dying, call 911, end quote. Mabel's brother Diego was asleep with his wife and their 2-year-old daughter in a nearby room when he heard the commotion. Fortunately, Diego and his family were able to escape from an upstairs window onto a neighbor's roof. Diego came to the front of the house and stood helplessly as he saw his father lunge down the stairs, hands outstretched, calling for help. Diego said he felt so helpless and that his dad was a good man, a hard worker. He also said that his mom was super excited and happy she was about to go on vacation with her other daughter, Melba. Junjun was able to get out of the house and run to a neighbor's house. Unfortunately, the neighbors were too afraid to let Junjun in. Back at the Touchettes' house in Kailua, around 11:38 p.m. that same night, Wendy is awoken to her husband Michael screaming. Wendy had woken up to a nightmare. There was smoke everywhere and the house was on fire. Michael tried to open the front door, but he wasn't able to. Wendy tried to go to the bathroom to get water, but couldn't because her husband yelled, quote, get out, end quote. Michael was on fire. Wendy was on fire. Everything was just red. Wendy ran to the kitchen and somehow got outside. Recalls someone pulling her away from the kitchen door. It was everywhere. It was too large. It was way out of control and just unable to contain. Unfortunately, no one was able to get to Kala and Joshua in time, and they both died in the fire. Shortly after midnight on August 25th, 1991, a fire broke out on Vaivai Loop near the Honolulu airport. A fire started, causing damages in the upwards of $150,000. At this point, the Honolulu Police Department is well aware of the shootings in Waipahu, the fire in Kailua, and the fire on Vaivai Loop. And on Monday, August 26, 1991, around 6:30 a.m. that morning, police arrest Orlando Ganal Sr. at his Waipahu home. Orlando Ganal Sr. is arrested and charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. His bail is set at $1,025,000. On that tragic night, many lives were changed forever. Mr. and Mrs. De La Cruz died from the gunshot wounds. Kala, who was 2 years old, and Joshua, just 10 months old, both died in the fire. Mabel Ganal was taken to St. Francis West, where she was in stable condition. Mabel had wounds to her neck, her back, and her leg. Junjun, who was just 14 years old at this time, was in guarded condition at Queen's Hospital. Michael and Wendy Touchettes were both in critical condition at Straub. They both had second and third degree burns. Now, Orlando could not afford his bail, so defense attorney Keith Shigatomi submitted a motion to the court for Orlando to have supervised release while he awaits his trial. During this request, Orlando's estranged wife Mabel really went to bat for Orlando. I mean, I cannot believe the things that she actually submitted to the court. For example, she told the court that she feels Orlando still loves her and that Orlando wouldn't hurt her, which doesn't even make sense because he had already hurt her and their son by shooting them.
Story that links accused murderer and arsonist Orlando Ganal Sr. and his wife Mabel was on display in circuit court. He wants out of prison with a supervised release and a lower bail. His wife Mabel Ganal is all for it. Call her romantic or call her crazy. That is because less than half a year ago she was witness to a killing and arson spree that her estranged husband allegedly performed to get back at her for seeing another man.
I got shot. My parents got shot. And my son.
Did you see the person that came into your parents' house and shot you?
No.
Wait a minute. Mabel Ganal is singing a new tune. What she does not seem to remember on this witness stand is what she said to an investigator while she was in the hospital last year. Back then, she knew the gunman, and she knew him very well.
She said she saw her husband, Orlando Ganal Sr., standing there with the pistol in his hand. This is at page 90. She described it as a silver-colored pistol. She said that he shot her.
Why is Mabel changing her story? Judge Marie Milks could not concern herself with that right now. She ruled that all the flip-flopping loyalties and the changing stories are part of what makes it necessary to keep Orlando Ganal locked up without bail. Witness safety is a concern. Mabel could lead Orlando to one key player in this case. His name is David Touchettes. He was the third element of the love triangle that allegedly sent Orlando into such a jealous rage that led to death and arson from Waipahu to Kailua. Mabel admits that she continues to speak by phone to Touchettes, who lives on the mainland, without Orlando's knowledge. So the sticky situation that may have prompted all the violence seems to be alive on this Valentine's Day, which gives the court an extra reason to keep Ganal as far removed from it as possible. Dave Carlin, KGMB News Nightcast.
Mabel Ganal says some things have really changed since that black night in August, mainly that she has abandoned plans to divorce her husband, that they've reconciled, and she's become a regular visitor at the prison. Another thing that has really changed, as you heard in that report, is her version of what happened that night. Mabel Ganal now says she made a mistake when she said her husband shot her. And that's what she told KGMB's Sandra Sagisi in this exclusive interview.
Valentine's Day, he always give me a good surprise. My birthday, Christmas, he was a good husband. I miss him because I can depend on him. Anything I want, it's always there because he works hard for me. He works hard for me.
Mabel Ganal says her husband Orlando showered her with expensive gifts over the years, from $14,000 worth of diamond jewelry to a beaming BMW. She had it all. But family members say all that changed when an extramarital affair cost her her parents' life. Mabel's brother says he believes Orlando Ganal murdered his parents in cold blood. He can't forget that, and he can't understand why his sister changed her testimony today.
It's all their fault.
Whose fault?
My sister, the boyfriend, David, and him. Orlando, you know. Orlando killed, but I don't know why she's lying. I don't know why.
Mabel Ganal maintains her husband was not the gunman and that David Touchettes isn't her boyfriend, but she does admit she was shot in the neck and her son in the head. She also says she lost the man who loved her with a passion.
At the time before this happened, he came to my parents' house and he was talking to me like 3 hours. He begs me to come home. He'll do anything for me to make me come home. And I was confused then at that moment.
Ganal blames herself for the death of her parents, Aradini and Santiago de la Cruz.
Now that they're gone, my parents is gone, and he's gone too. I have nobody to turn to. I come home, and I think about them. I just miss them. And my family hate me because of what happened. They're blaming me of what happened. They don't blame Orlando, but they're blaming me. Then I look around in the house, I look what we did, and I think about Orlando. And I said to myself, what happened to our plan? What happened? They're gone.
In Waipahu, Sandra Sagisi, KGM.
In the beginning, when the motion was submitted to the court, it was said that Orlando, if he was granted supervised release, he would be staying with his brother, Abraham Ganal, in his Waipahu home. But Abraham's landlord had told him that Orlando was not allowed to stay in the Waipahu home. This, along with Mabel's conflicting testimony, really weakened the motion. On the flip side, Wendy Touchettes and her family, of course, opposed Orlando being granted supervised release. Wendy was very fearful of her life. She was afraid that if Orlando was given the opportunity to be released, that he would continue his revenge and go after David. There was no way that the court was going to grant him supervised release. The court denied that motion, and the judge actually revoked Orlando's bail. The judge was very concerned for David Touchettes' safety. The trial began on March 1st, 1993, and Judge Marie Milks was the presiding judge. The jury consisted of 7 men and 5 women. The charges that Orlando was facing, again, was first-degree murder and attempted murder. On the first day of trial, Orlando broke down in sobs as the opening statements were being read. Defense attorney Keith Shigatomi claims that Orlando was so overwhelmed for months of strife and stress that he had been changed beyond recognition and no longer had the strength to hold it in. The defense team claimed that Orlando suffered from extreme emotional and mental distress, from back pain, work conflict, financial and family problems, and that Orlando does not recall the shooting or the fires. Allegedly, Orlando claims the last thing he remembers before going on a kill spree was a phone call that he had with his soon-to-be ex-wife on the evening of their divorce hearing. According to Orlando, Mabel Ganal laughed, saying, quote, "I'll see you in court," end quote, and slammed the phone down. Allegedly, that was the last thing Orlando remembered. According to the defense team, they feel that because of all the extreme emotional and mental stress that Orlando was experiencing, that Orlando should be convicted of the lesser charge of manslaughter and attempted manslaughter. The defense team also claims that Orlando confided in his wife. He tried to talk to her, he tried to confide in her, and all she did was laugh at him and put him down and told him that he wasn't a man. The defense team claims that Mabel had Orlando pretty much wrapped around her finger. She knew this and she used it to her advantage. The defense team also brought in an expert to testify about the tension suffered by a Filipino male if his wife has an affair with a Caucasian man. According to this expert, in Filipino culture especially, it's very demeaning, keeping the bloodline strong, you know, and a lot of cultures do this, right? In the eyes of the Filipino culture. I'm not saying in the eyes of everybody. I'm just saying in this instance, in this case, that's what the defense team was trying to explain to the court, that Orlando was even more stressed out because David Touchettes was a white man. Orlando, surprisingly, he did go on the witness stand. Orlando portrayed his wife as a two-timing, you know, cold-hearted woman. He talked about all the times that they were having sex, and Mabel would talk about her lover. Mabel would put him down, be very condescending towards him, laugh at him. He talked about how Mabel would pretty much just flaunt her affair in front of him. Orlando claims that Mabel didn't care about their son, and Mabel didn't deny this. The day before the shooting, Junjun had ran away, and Orlando was very distraught about this. He was very worried about his son. And in regards to Junjun running away, Mabel said, quote, "He's more worried about it than me. I just didn't care." End quote. According to Orlando, Mabel would do crazy things. Orlando claims that Mabel would get into arguments with him and their son Junjun. She would scream at them, swear at them. She would yell, scream, swear, and she would manhandle the both of them. And then she would turn around and call the police on them. She'll say things like she's gonna beat her head against the wall and then call the police and tell them that it was her son that did that to her. On another occasion, allegedly, Mabel assaulted Junjun. I guess, you know, she was hitting him or whatever she was doing, screaming, yelling. Then she tried to flip the script, had Junjun sent away to the state juvenile detention home. So just things like that. Now the prosecution's approach was that Orlando sought revenge because his wife had left him. He was having trouble at work and he wanted to retaliate against his wife's lover, David Touchettes. Prosecution claims that on August 24th, 1991, Orlando had pointed a gun in Mabel's face, threatened to kill her, their son Junjun, and also himself. The prosecution claims that this was, you know, the beginning of the end, basically. This was the start of what's yet to come, because the next night, on August 25th, 1991, Orlando gathered ammunition, he got gasoline, he got a sledgehammer, and he prepared before going out. Prosecution believes that Orlando planned all of this. He was pissed off and he wanted revenge. And he was going to get revenge by any means and at any cost. This wasn't on a whim. Orlando would call the Touchettes' house. He would call many times, threatening David, telling David to leave his wife alone, asking David to leave Hawaii, go back to the mainland. When David Touchettes went on the stand in regards to the affair with Mabel Ganal, David said, quote, "We both fell in love with each other. We made a mistake." End quote. In regards to Orlando and everything that he did, David Touchettes stated, quote, "I never dreamed in my wildest imagination that someone could be in so much self-pity that he would kill innocent people." end quote. David said that he got several threatening phone calls from Orlando, and that the reason why David eventually left Hawaii and went back to the mainland is because he was afraid for his life. David said he left Hawaii in July of 1991, but he continued to have the affair with Mabel. That Mabel went to visit him in Denver, Colorado in late July, early August of 1991. Now at this point, during this trial, 1993, unfortunately, David's brother Michael succumbed to the second and third degree burns that he got that night in the fire. So Michael did not survive. Junjun, Orlando Ganal Jr., also took the stand. And in 1993, he was 15 years old and he was living in Denver with his mom, Mabel. Now, at this point in 1993, Mabel, along with her son, Junjun, they live in Denver, and David and Mabel are in a relationship. I believe early 1994, David and Mabel welcomed a daughter together. Junjun took the stand, and you could tell that he was a kid stuck between his parents. You know, Junjun said that they were always fighting. His parents were always fighting. He was always caught in the middle of their fights. He said that at one point, he told his father that, you know, he should let his mom go away with her boyfriend. And he actually told his father, "Mom doesn't love you anymore. You should let her go away with her boyfriend." And again, this is just my opinion. I think Junjun said that. He knew that his parents was to a point of no return. And I think he believed that if his father had let his mother go away, that the fighting would stop. You know, no child likes to see their parents fight. So maybe he said that because he knew that the fighting would stop if Orlando would just accept it and move on and let Mabel go and be with her boyfriend. That's just my opinion. But Junjun does recall that it was his father who had shot him in his face, in his jaw actually, on the night of August 25th, 1991. And Junjun said that he knows that it was his father because he could see his father's face in the light. The most impactful testimony was when Wendy Touchettes took the witness stand. Now, after everything happened, Wendy moved to New York and lived with her husband's parents, Evelyn and John Touchettes. Now, in 1993, when the trial was taking place, Wendy was still trying to heal from her burns. Wendy was burned 40% of her body, mostly on her face and on her hands. And Wendy did not want to go and see Orlando's face. She didn't want to go back to Hawaii. She didn't want to go and relive this nightmare. She didn't want to go and relive that night, the night that changed her life forever. But she felt that it was the thing that she could do to, you know, get justice for her husband and her two children. And she wanted to honor them by going and facing the man that had taken them away from her. Wendy testifies that she remembers waking up to her husband's screams. She said that everything was just red. Everything was on fire. Her husband was on fire. And she remembers her husband yelling, quote, he was here, Orlando," end quote. During the fire, during everything, during this nightmare, Wendy wouldn't see her husband again until they were both in the hospital. During Wendy's testimony, Orlando sat quietly and did not say a word. Wendy said she remembers seeing Mabel visit David about twice a week at their Kailua home. And she recalls seeing Orlando on 3 different occasions in the early morning. She also remembers receiving numerous calls from Orlando at all hours of the day and night. Wendy claims that Orlando showed up at their home around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with 2 or 3 other men knocked on their door and asked if Mabel was there. Wendy testified that Orlando would follow Mabel around. Wendy also testified that she and her husband told Orlando that David had moved back to the mainland, and Orlando didn't believe them because he said that David's truck was still in the front yard. But Wendy and Michael explained to Orlando, yes, that's true, David's truck is still here, but he went back to the mainland and we're gonna ship his truck to the mainland. And according to Wendy, she said that Orlando accepted this explanation. Wendy also testified that, they were afraid for their lives. They were fearful of Orlando, but didn't think that they needed to be afraid anymore once David had left the island. Felt like, okay, David's gone, essentially the problem's gone, Orlando's not gonna be calling the house or showing up because there's no reason to now. David's not here. Although they were afraid for their lives about a month before everything happened, once David left back to the mainland, they felt that all the threats, all the calls would stop. There was a lot of people that testified in this trial. And after all the testimonies were given, after all the arguments were made from both sides, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts on April 7, 1993. While the verdict was being read, Orlando was slumped forward, frowning, his eyes were shut, and he did not say a single word. Orlando Ganal Sr. is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was delivered, Wendy Touchettes stated, quote, "I feel relieved, but it's not over. It doesn't change my life. Just because he'll be in jail doesn't mean it's enough. He hurt too many people." Wendy also claims that she doesn't have a relationship with David. Amy Lowe, which is Wendy's sister, said that justice was done and served for Wendy's children and her husband, but that Wendy still has to live with the pain. Amy believes that Mabel's actions played a huge part in Orlando's actions. Alright guys, that's all I have for you on this case. This was a very tragic story. I mean, so many people lost their lives because of one man being so jealous and having a broken heart. So the moral of this story is don't cheat. Don't cheat. Don't cheat. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You never know what the ripple effect is going to be. It's just not worth it. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.